I'm Sheila Brummer with Siouxland Public Media News. Around 100 people gathered in downtown Sioux City Thursday afternoon to bring awareness to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. The event was organized in part by the Great Plains Action Society, a group that fights for social justice. Sunrose Iron Shell is part of the movement.
It's all about being seen, but because society has forgotten us, we are hunted, and we've been hunted for the past 500 years.
Joining the event, local law enforcement leaders, including Sioux City Police Chief Rex Mueller.
But apart, we're ineffective. Together and united and a part of one team, we are much better, and we can work for much better solutions.
Chief Mueller and leaders in the Native American community say both sides need to work together and not be afraid to assist in investigations.
Because we all have the same goals. We want to find those people who are missing, and we want to bring justice to the families who have lost loved ones, like Terry McCauley.
Terry McCauley was murdered in 1983. So far, no arrests have been made in her case. Several in attendance held signs with her image, including her son Nathaniel McCauley of Omaha, who was only a toddler at the time of the killing.
It's a beautiful thing, man. I thought I'd never see it. I love it. Love it for everybody. Love it for the community. Love it for me and my family and everybody here.
The National Institute of Justice reports 4 out of 5 Native women will have experienced violence during their lifetime.
Change doesn't happen unless we make it happen.
We took it really hard. Why did it happen to us?
Even though Nathaniel McCauley was too young to remember his mother, she died when he was a toddler, he does not want the community to forget about her unsolved death.
She loved us. You know, she loved people. She was easy to get along with, and just basically wanted to live a full life, you know, and that never took place. That never happened for her.
Living without his mother, McCauley felt a void.
I just turned to drugs and alcohol, you know what I mean? It was like the meth just took that empty feeling away from, you know, losing my mom. Like, it was just like a hole in my, I don't know how you want to call it, just like an emptiness that I felt with her not being there and not really having anybody. My father was in prison basically our whole life, and my grandma raised us the best she could, but we just, you know what I mean, we were just 2 young kids without a mom and without a dad, and it was just hard for us, you know.
What did she want you to know about your mother?
That she was a good girl. She was a little rebellious, but you know what I mean? She was young. She had us when she was young, but she tried her best to raise us as a young kid.
Terry McCauley was only 18 in the fall of 1983 when she did not return home after a night out with friends. They last saw her get into a vehicle near a bar on the west side of the city. Several days later, her body was found miles away in a wooded area off of Floyd Boulevard.
This lady needs justice. Her family needs justice.
Retired Police Sergeant Tony Sunclade served in the Detective Bureau during the era of Terry McCauley's murder.
Weeks later, I was involved in a case where an individual fired a shotgun into a house where his ex-girlfriend was living. It was the same type of shotgun, same kind of rounds that was used in this, and just one thing led to another, and I started piecing stuff together, and it sounded like, hey, maybe this guy is good for the Terry McCauley homicide.
Do you believe beyond a doubt that this person did not only the shooting that you first investigated, but also murdered Terry McCauley?
I have no doubt.
Why isn't he arrested? What is going on here, do you think?
The county attorney's office decided that there was not enough evidence. Period.
You saw the evidence. Do you think there was enough evidence?
Absolutely. There was enough evidence to take this to a grand jury, and I'm sure there would have been an indictment.
Can I get your name and your title?
Okay. It's Sergeant Mike Manthorn. I'm the supervisor in charge of crimes against persons and investigations.
Even though the Sioux City Police Department classifies Terry McCauley a cold case, work continues to officially identify her killer.
That was one thing that struck me when I started really reviewing the case, is how hard the investigators worked and our crime scene techs worked on this case. They scoured the crime scene. They came out later on in the spring and found more evidence because as rainfall and all these things happen. Sometimes things turn up, and they were successful in finding more items, some of her clothing items and things like that. They were out with metal detectors, and they did everything they could to try to make sure that they got all the evidence that was there to indicate who was involved and all of that. And then their work on forensics, especially for the car, was unbelievable. They brought a van full of car parts to the state lab, and they did luminol testing. They did everything that they had as far as technology at that time that was available. They pulled out all the stops.
The police department continues to send items of interest to the state crime lab for analysis.
And this is just recently. We've developed a almost complete, but a partial profile of the victim's DNA.
So far, nothing ties a suspect to the crime.
It's very frustrating because, we obviously deal with very high standards of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. When you're looking at taking something to trial. Obviously, we can make arrests on probable cause, and we feel that we probably would have enough to do that, but you have to be very careful in a case like this, because once it's been to trial, if you don't get a successful verdict, then double jeopardy kicks in, and we're done. It is frustrating because we have a very strong opinion about what happened. And obviously this was a very heinous crime, and the family is devastated. So we really would like to see this brought to justice, but we have to be careful how we do that, because we only get one chance.
Are you able to name a suspect?
I'd rather keep him off the list at this point. There have been some more recent developments and some focus that we've had from a prosecutorial standpoint. So if we may want to take steps in the future, and I'd like to just kind of keep that element of surprise.
I talked to an investigator who's working the case now, and a lot of it, they're trying to hinge a lot of it on DNA evidence.
Yes.
But that, of course, you know this all too well, is that takes time. And I know for some there's concern that there won't be enough time to bring the suspect to justice.
Well, he'll face justice eventually in where God decides to put him when he's gone.
Advocacy groups also want justice for Terry McCauley. Some even started a Facebook page to increase awareness and support.
He reached out and asked if they could, get permission from us to do all that stuff. I said, yeah, we'd love for you to do it. You know what I mean? And then I think that's what really brought it in the spotlight.
Nathaniel McCauley also credits awareness of the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement for keeping his mother's name alive, and his tribe, the Omaha people, for keeping him grounded.
It means a lot to us. It helps us stick with our roots. We need that in our life.
A life for Nathaniel McCauley that includes sobriety, 5 years clean and counting. He perseveres for himself and his mother.
Anybody that's going through somebody being missing or murdered in their family, just keep looking, never stop. Just push for that justice.
In Sioux City, Sheila Brummer, Siouxland Public Media News.
A search has been organized to help locate a missing member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. 36-year-old Brenda Payer was last seen late last week at the McDonald's on Hamilton Boulevard in Sioux City. Her family notified police on Saturday night, according to spokesperson Sergeant Jeremy McClure.
We believe that she may be possibly in some crisis, so we just want to make sure that she's safe, and that if she needs some help, that we can get her the help that she needs.
That help is also coming from the Great Plains Action Society that organized the upcoming search for Friday. Here's board member and Native American advocate Terry Medina, who has known Payer for years.
She's very loving, compassionate mother. She has 2 beautiful daughters. A year and a half, so it's been a little rough, and so she hasn't been on her medication, which is the main thing that we're concerned about. No, there's been reports or sightings of her up here in Siouxland area, so she's still with us here. We're just trying to track her down so we can get her back on her medication. And the family, of course, I can't even comprehend one of my daughters missing.
Sergeant McClure says in his experience, members of the indigenous community have been extremely marginalized.
Whether it's, their response to generational trauma issues and the personal trauma they've experienced in mental health and substance abuse issues. And so, we try to be more aware of that and have a little more, understanding of how trauma affects people and how we respond as a law enforcement agency to those issues and concerns.
The police department put together a Native American Advisory Council and works on building partnerships with local organizations and the public.
Someone's in crisis and they need help, we're going to dedicate those resources to try to locate them.
Sioux City police say a missing Native American woman has been located. 36-year-old Brenda Payer had been reported missing by her family 1 month ago. Today, authorities say she was located by family members out of state and is doing well and was unharmed. And a news release, Payer's family and the Sioux City Police Department say they appreciate the public's help in trying to locate her.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation is investigating the death of a teenager on the Santee Sioux Indian Reservation. 19-year-old Ashley Wabasha, who is Native American, was last seen on March 27th, and her body was found on Monday. The Omaha office of the FBI sent out a statement that says because of an ongoing investigation, no further details on the case can be released. The agency investigates the most serious crimes in Indian country. Nebraska ranks number 6 on the list of states with the most missing and murdered Indigenous women. According to the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, the Santee Sioux Reservation lands are located in Holt County, Nebraska. And that's a look at Siouxland Public Media News. For more updates, you can go to kwit.org. I'm Mary Hartnett.
This week on The Exchange, we explore the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women with local and regional advocates.
Seek out those Native American communities within your communities and see what you can do to help.
Plus, hear an update on a Sioux City murder involving a member of the Omaha tribe of Nebraska, killed almost 40 years ago.
Just keep looking, never stop.
The life and death of Terry McCauley and the new push to bring a suspect to justice.
I truly believe that he is the one that did it.
I'm Mary Hartnett. I am here with Sheila Brummer. Today we're focusing on an issue impacting the Siouxland community.
May 5th is National Missing and Murdered Women and Girls Awareness Day. It is also the birthday of Hannah Harris, a Northern Cheyenne woman who went missing back in 2013. Well, today we give voice to this important issue with local leaders, regional advocates, and even highlight a cold case impacting a member of the Omaha tribe and her family.
Later, we'll explore enforcement by talking to a retired FBI agent who spent a large part of his career working in Indian country.
We're going to start our conversation today with two advocates. We're excited to have them here. And they're both affiliated with the Great Plains Action Society. Tricia Ettringer is Operations and Missing and Murdered Relations Director for the Great Plains Society. Thank you for being here. Also, board member for the Society, Karen Mackey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. And Trish, you're a member of the Ho-Chunk tribe?
Yes. Yep, I am. The Ho-Chunk Nation.
Part of Sioux City's Inclusion Advisory Committee.
Yes.
Yes. And Karen, you are with the Santee Sioux tribe, the executive director of the Sioux City Human Rights Commission. You're also the co-founder of the Siouxland Pride Alliance.
Yes.
Yeah. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
You know, Trish, we talk about the whole issue of missing and murdered women and young people. This is a huge issue, right, for Indian country.
It is. This has been going on since our first contact with settlers, basically, and it just kind of perpetuated throughout the centuries. And we see this, in Hollywood videos, media, even music. So yes, this has been an age-old epidemic that has been brought upon our people.
Karen, I know that you've been pretty concerned about this and trying to give some voice to this issue as well.
I have. There's been many members of our local Indigenous community that really are very concerned about this, and we want the larger community to understand what's going on and to talk about this.
This issue is gaining more awareness, Sheila.
You're right, Mary. It's definitely gaining momentum. And here's a little bit of audio from this week's Sioux City City Council meeting.
Now, therefore, I, Robert E. Scott, Mayor of the City of Sioux City, Iowa, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2nd, 2022 as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Day and encourage all of our community members to observe, recognize, and encourage collective action to bring the MMIW crisis to an end.
This day is to raise awareness of this epidemic that has claimed many lives of our sisters, brothers, non-binary relatives, relatives with disabilities, and children. At this time, I would like to remember the following missing and murdered Indigenous relatives from around this region. Terry McCauley, Michelle Mickey Lemire, Cozy Decora, Lanice Blackbird, Ashley Aldrich, Zachary Bearhills, Rodney McCauley, Jesse Gilpin, Ashley Wabasha, and my Chewy, Paulette Polly Walker.
Tricia, you mentioned tribal members horribly impacted by violence, including a recent case involving a teenager from the Santee Sioux tribe, Ashley Wabasha, and she's 19 years old, last seen March 27th, and tragically, her body was found April 18th, like 22 days after she disappeared. The FBI is handling the case, right? And we don't know much else about it.
Yeah, there's, I think the family is still waiting to hear more details about what happened. I think they're still waiting for the autopsy report and what that is going to tell them about, her last moments. When we're dealing with this epidemic, we have all of our families and we always talk about the good things. So we share, the good things too as well in our healing. So,
right. And you also mentioned other names as well.
Yes.
I think many people, at least people I know, friends of mine in the Native American community, they all have a name of someone impacted. And you mentioned someone, the last name there, if you wanted to share a little bit of information with us.
These are relatives that I know about, but we do know with this epidemic that there are so many missing and that haven't been found. And so that's the reason why this is so important. And Paulette Walker is my auntie. Chewy is what we use the Ho-Chunk word as auntie. But she went missing back in the 80s. That was, kind of a trying time, so to speak. So there were different factors as far as like what happened or, we did have some, mass murderers around that time period. And so growing up, being adopted into a non-Native family and then like going through my journey of discovering, my Native roots and just seeing how like different elements of being Native, a Native woman, and finding that out was just really personally affected me. It still affects me today, and it drives me and it motivates me to help. I do want to touch on just briefly how unprecedented it was to have the MMIW proclamation. I think we, Christine and I, Christine Nobis, who is the founder of Great Plains Action Society, we had this conversation, and I don't think there's been a MMIW proclamation here in Iowa.
Oh, wow.
So I think that was the first time. I think that's safe to say that.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
yes.
For as far as like a city level so I think that's really amazing. I think that's really great. The Sioux City Council member Matthew O'Kane is the one that approached me because he's seen, the recent death of Ashley and how this is just a continuation of just violence on Native American women and our relatives in general. And he thought it was important to do that. So I just, I want to say thank you to the Sioux City Council and Mayor Bob Scott for doing that. That's great.
And I know, Karen, before we've talked to you about issues, I know with your own family with boarding schools, and you were talking about relatives who have been abused in the past.
The mistreatment of Native women has been an epidemic, literally, since first contact with Europeans. I mean, that is how our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, going further back, that's how they have been treated by this society. And I think one of the important things to talk about, too, is something Tricia mentioned when she was receiving the proclamation, when she was naming those names. It isn't just women. Violence against Native people is a real thing in this society. Women are really, really impacted by this. but it happens to men, to non-binary people, to trans people who are Indigenous as well.
No, thanks, Karen. And the Santee Wellness Center, they're actually hosting a week of learning sessions, and they're going to do a memorial walk and run for missing, murdered Indigenous women. And they're doing it in honor of Ashley Wabasha. And here's Terry Kiddo with the Santee Health and Wellness Center with more information.
Just recently, we had a young woman who went missing and was found murdered. I mean, I'm going to say murdered because they're still investigating her death. And we just laid her to rest. And I had originally intended to do some education awareness here in Santee for a young girl named Ashlyn Mike who disappeared and was found murdered in New Mexico. I received the information from a friend of mine in New Mexico, and the mother was doing work around Amber Alerts. And so I was doing some research on what Nebraska is doing when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women. An urban organization, Indian organization, and the State Patrol work together, and part of their kind of results of their study came up with there needs to be more coordination between jurisdictions, state, county, tribal. There needs to be more education on what to do in those first 72 hours, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's also kind of a long history here in Santee, as well as other reservations, of missing women over the years in history. And it might have been for land, it might have been for, domestic violence or whatever those things were, but there are kind of in our written history, Knox County, incidents of missing, murdered Indigenous women. It comes home really hard because we just lost a young lady just beginning life, 19 years old. And it's important that we come together and honor her memory and keep awareness, whether that's, safety awareness, finding a safe place to go, getting help for mental health or addiction needs, those kind of things.
There's also another regional organization that does similar work as well, and it's called the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. They bring about education awareness to the issue, too. And we actually talked to the founder, Lily Mendoza, who actually started the organization. They're based in Rapid City, South Dakota, and they started back in 2016.
We are there to support the families, whether it's going to funerals, wakes, or just going to visit them. So we just kind of check in on the families, like via, messenger. We call the families just to kind of see how they're doing as well. The last data that we were able to look at and see was actually in 2016 when the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, put together some data, which was 5,714 Indigenous women. Okay. And we know that data isn't correct. First of all, we know that this began assault on our women at first contact, 200 years ago. We knew this began then. Now, how do we prove that? As far as data, we can't, and actually we have a researcher on board to look at that issue, to kind of look at not so much on the numbers, because that's going to be really hard to document, but look at different instances when the French came in, when people started coming over into our lands, and because they immediately really started assaulting our women, So we just now have a researcher on board, and she's really, really looking to see what that looks like, so that we can share that as we go out and we do our education and our training. Because we're out there. I like to say moccasins on the ground. We're out there working in the community and with the people, and we always need help. And we always encourage non-Indigenous people to work with us.
That is Lily Mendoza from the Red Ribbon Skirt Society. They're getting traction across the country. You can follow their work.
the Red Ribbon Skirt Society by checking out Facebook. And the group, they rely just on donations and volunteers, and they want support from all allies, even outside the Native American community.
You know, we want to help our families, and the best way that we can is, again, you know, financially, being able to give the travel and lodging, you know, memorial planning, things of that sort, walks and runs that are being put on. Those need money, basically. And then also just sharing stuff out, whether it's social media, whether you're having a conversation, just talking about it, and then showing up. Showing up is the biggest piece of it too as well. Showing up and supporting that and knowing, you know, this is why I'm here and I'm gonna give my all to this fight.
No, that's good to hear for sure. You know, earlier this hour, we also heard from a regional advocate about the importance of partnerships. And those partnerships also involve law enforcement. We wanted to hear a little bit more about that as well. So we reached out to a former FBI agent for his perspective on missing, murder, and Indigenous women. Brad Purcell, he retired 4 years ago after 22 years of service, and most of his work was done in Indian country.
From my experience in the cases I worked, and then things I've read and stayed up with about it, training and stuff, Native women are at significantly higher rates if they live on a reservation to be sexually assaulted, victims of domestic violence, or victims of homicide. Most of those, in my experience, are committed by other Native men that are known to the victim. It's not always familial, but a large number of them are. But when you have agents that are either burned out and don't care anymore, or that are new and inexperienced, or got assigned to Indian country and don't want to be there, you might not get the customer service that you would from another experienced agent that has worked in Indian country for a while or stayed there by choice. And that, it's like anything else. It depends on the detective that catches your case, no matter what color you are or where you're at. There's good ones and bad ones. And it's very easy to ignore natives.
Karen Mackey and Trish Ettringer both represent the Great Plains Action Society. Mm-hmm. And there's something that you wanted to talk about, Tricia, when it comes to law enforcement. We heard about the shortage, and sometimes it depends on the agent that's covering it, because it's usually just one agent, really, that doesn't have a lot of supervision, according to what Brad said. But what would you want people to know, too, about law enforcement?
So there's different elements, too, when working with law enforcement. I think as a representative of the Native community in general, that the Native community also needs to be cooperative to the law enforcement in order for them to do their job.
Do you think that the lines of communication are better now between?
I do. I think, as far as working with the Sioux City Police Department, I do feel hopeful. Not to say, that there's, I think the relations are definitely getting better. Rex is able to communicate kind of like, okay, this is what we need from the Native community, and this is what, and I'm able to go to Rex and say, this is what I need from you. So yeah, so I think it's getting better.
And you're obviously talking about Rex Mueller, the police chief, and being part of that inclusion committee too. I think you have more access to local leaders too, which helps.
Yep.
I think I was talking earlier to Sheila about sort of this missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, and this study they're doing in Nebraska. And I talked to them, and they said there's so many very young people, young boys missing. And that's something that we don't often know about. And we talk to police about it. Now we talk to them more. We know more about that now. Do you think that is a help in sort of opening this up?
I do. I think so. Talking about it, raising the awareness. And yeah, like I said, it goes back to kind of the traditional patriarchal belief of like, a man is, or, boys are supposed to cry and, all those things. And so, yeah, I do believe that, not a lot of people are going to look for the missing boys or the men because of that.